In the shadows of medieval Europe, where superstition and brutality walked hand in hand, one name rose above all others as a symbol of both fear and fascination: Vlad the Impaler. To some, he was a hero, a fierce defender of Christendom who stood against the seemingly unstoppable tide of the Ottoman Empire. To others, he was a monster, a bloodthirsty tyrant whose cruelty knew no bounds. His name became whispered in taverns, recorded in chronicles, and later immortalized in folklore. And from his legacy of violence and terror, a legend was born that would echo for centuries: the legend of Dracula. But behind the myth lies a man. A man forged in betrayal, shaped by captivity, hardened by endless wars, and remembered most of all for the method of punishment that earned him his infamous title, impalement. This is the story of Vlad III of Wallachia. Not the vampire of Gothic novels, but the prince, the warrior, the executioner, and perhaps the most feared ruler of the 15th century. His life was short, but his impact was eternal. And to understand his legacy, we must begin not with the monster of legend, but with the child who would one day become the impaler. Vlad was born in 1431 in the fortress town of Sighisoara, in Transylvania. His father, Vlad II Dracula, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a secretive chivalric society sworn to defend Christianity against the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. It was from this order that Vlad's family name, Dracula, meaning the dragon, was taken. His son, therefore, was known as Dracula, the son of the dragon. But though he was born into nobility, his childhood was anything but safe. The political landscape of Eastern Europe at the time was a deadly chessboard, with Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and the smaller principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia constantly vying for control. Alliances shifted like sand, and betrayal was as common as loyalty. In 1442, when Vlad was about 11 years old, his father made a fateful decision. To secure his throne and appease the Ottomans, he sent his two younger sons, Vlad and his brother Radu, as hostages to the court of Sultan Mehmed II. For the young princes, this was not simply a diplomatic arrangement. It was a form of political insurance. So long as their father remained obedient, the boys would be treated with a measure of respect. But if he betrayed the Sultan, their lives would be forfeit. In Edirne, the Ottoman capital at the time, Vlad and Radu lived under constant scrutiny. They were educated in the ways of the Turks, taught language, literature, philosophy, and even military strategy. They learned discipline, horsemanship, and the arts of war. But they also learned fear. Accounts suggest that Vlad's time in Ottoman captivity left deep scars on his psyche. While his younger brother Radu adapted to life at the Sultan's court, earning the nickname Radu the Handsome, and eventually becoming loyal to the Ottomans, Vlad remained defiant, bitter, and suspicious. It was here, many historians believe, that his hatred of the Ottomans took root. It was here that he was exposed to the ruthless methods of punishment used by the empire, including the gruesome spectacle of impalement, a method of execution designed not only to kill but to terrify all who witnessed it. For years, Vlad remained in captivity, while back in Wallachia, his father faced treachery. In 1447, Vlad II Dracula was betrayed and killed by rival boyars, the powerful nobles of Wallachia. His elder son, Mircea, was tortured and buried alive. The young Vlad, still in Ottoman hands, had lost his family and his kingdom in one stroke. It is said that from this moment on, Vlad's life became consumed by a single, burning purpose: vengeance. in 1448, opportunity came. With Ottoman support, the teenage Vlad was installed as ruler of Wallachia. But his first reign was brief, lasting only a matter of weeks before he was driven out by a rival supported by Hungary. This was the beginning of a pattern that would define much of his life, a relentless struggle for power in a land torn apart by foreign influence and noble treachery. Wallachia was a principality caught between giants. To the south lay the Ottomans, whose armies seemed unstoppable. To the north, the Kingdom of Hungary, equally ambitious and equally dangerous. And within Wallachia itself, the boyars plotted and schemed, each vying for influence, and ready to betray their prince if it meant securing their own wealth. For Vlad, survival meant not only reclaiming the throne but holding it with an iron fist. His first reign may have been short, but it gave him a taste of power, and it would not be his last. In the years that followed, he wandered through Moldavia and Transylvania, seeking allies, plotting his return. He grew into adulthood hardened by exile, betrayal, and loss. By the time he seized the throne again in 1456, Vlad was no longer a boy. He was a man forged in fire, sharpened like a blade, and prepared to rule through fear. And rule through fear he did. It was in this second reign that Vlad would earn his terrifying epithet, Teeps, the Impaler. For he would unleash upon his enemies, both foreign and domestic, a reign of terror unlike anything Europe had seen before. When Vlad returned to the throne of Wallachia in 1456, the land he inherited was one of chaos and treachery. The boyars, the nobles who had conspired against his father and murdered his brother, still held enormous power. Rival claimants circled like vultures. And beyond Wallachia's borders, both Hungary and the Ottoman Empire cast long shadows of domination. Vlad knew he could not rely on loyalty. To secure his rule, he turned to fear. Almost immediately, he began purging the boyars who had betrayed his family. At an Easter feast, legend says he invited the nobles of Wallachia to dine with him. After the banquet, he arrested them. The elderly and infirm were executed on the spot. The able-bodied were marched to the mountains, where they were forced into slave labor to build his fortress at Poenary, a stronghold perched on a cliff that would later become synonymous with his reign. Few survived the ordeal. This was the beginning of a reign where cruelty was not simply punishment, it was policy. Vlad understood the psychology of terror. To rule Wallachia, he had to make betrayal unthinkable. He had to make disobedience unimaginable. And so, he turned to a method of execution that was both spectacular and horrifying: impalement. Impalement was more than death, it was a slow, agonizing, humiliating display. A sharpened stake was forced through the body, sometimes entering through the abdomen, chest, or buttocks, and exiting through the mouth, shoulder, or back. Victims could linger for hours, even days, before death claimed them. Placed on public display, the impaled served as grim warnings. Villagers, soldiers, and nobles alike saw what awaited those who betrayed the prince. Fear spread like wildfire. In a land plagued by lawlessness, Vlad's brutal justice created order. Bandits vanished. Roads became safe. Merchants could travel through Wallachia without fear of robbery. But the price was written in blood. For Vlad, terror was not a byproduct of power, it was the very foundation of it. The most infamous display of Vlad's cruelty came in 1462, during one of his fiercest confrontations with the Ottomans. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, had grown tired of Vlad's defiance. Wallachia was supposed to pay tribute to the Ottoman Empire. Instead, Vlad had resisted, raiding Ottoman settlements across the Danube and slaughtering thousands. His message was clear: Wallachia would not bow. In response, Mehmed gathered one of the largest armies ever seen in the Balkans. Estimates range from 60,000 to 100,000 soldiers, and marched into Wallachia to crush the Impaler once and for all. Vlad knew he could not match such numbers in open battle. Instead, he turned to tactics of terror and psychological warfare. He waged a scorched earth campaign, burning crops, poisoning wells, and denying the Ottomans supplies. His men attacked under the cover of night, striking swiftly before vanishing into the forests. And then, as Mehmed's army advanced deeper into Wallachia, they came upon a sight that froze them in horror. Before them stretched a grotesque landscape, a forest of the impaled. Tens of thousands of corpses, Ottoman prisoners and traitors alike, lined the fields. The stakes stretched as far as the eye could see. Some victims were fresh, their twisted faces still contorted in agony. Others were rotting, their remains blackened by the sun. Chroniclers claimed that the Sultan himself recoiled at the sight. One account records Mehmed saying, "It is not possible to deprive of his country a man who has done such great deeds." Whether apocryphal or not, the message was clear: Vlad had turned cruelty into a weapon of war. Though ultimately forced to retreat in the face of overwhelming numbers, Vlad's campaign left an indelible mark on his enemies. The Ottomans had seen many foes, but none like this. The showdown with Mehmed II was the defining conflict of Vlad's reign. While he lacked the manpower of the Ottoman war machine, Vlad wielded cunning and ruthlessness like a blade. In one of the most daring episodes of the war, Vlad launched a night raid on the Ottoman camp in June 1462. Under cover of darkness, he and a small force infiltrated the vast encampment of Mehmed's army, setting fires, slaying guards, and striking terror into the heart of the Sultan's forces. His goal was audacious: to kill the Sultan himself. Though he failed to assassinate Mehmed, the raid sowed chaos and fear. To the Ottomans, it was proof that Vlad was no ordinary enemy. He was unpredictable, merciless, and willing to gamble everything. But despite his brilliance in guerrilla warfare, Vlad was ultimately overwhelmed. The Ottomans installed his brother, Radu the Handsome, as their preferred ruler of Wallachia. Unlike Vlad, Radu was pliant, loyal to the Sultan, and backed by Ottoman might. By the end of 1462, Vlad was forced to flee. His kingdom was lost, and his enemies closed in. Exiled from his throne, Vlad sought aid from Europe. He turned to the Kingdom of Hungary, ruled by Matthias Corvinus, hoping to rally Christendom against the Ottomans. But instead of finding allies, Vlad found betrayal. Corvinus imprisoned him, using forged letters to claim that Vlad had secretly plotted with the Ottomans. For more than a decade, Vlad languished in captivity. Yet even in prison, his legend grew. In Germany, pamphlets spread stories of his cruelty, accounts of boiling people alive, mutilating women, burning villages, and of course, his endless impalements. These tales, some exaggerated and some entirely invented, painted Vlad as a monster beyond comprehension. He became one of Europe's first true figures of printed propaganda, a symbol of fear distributed by the new technology of the printing press. And yet, in other parts of Europe, he was celebrated. To many, he was a hero who had stood against the Ottomans, who had defended Christian lands when others had faltered. Monster or martyr, tyrant or protector, Vlad's image split along the same lines that divided Europe itself. After more than a decade in captivity, Vlad was released in 1475, when Europe once again faced the threat of Ottoman invasion. He returned to Wallachia with Hungarian support, reclaiming the throne for a third time. But his final reign was short-lived. Within a year he was dead. The exact circumstances of Vlad's death remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts say he fell in battle against the Ottomans in late 1476. Others suggest he was betrayed and assassinated by his own boyars. Still others claim that he was mistaken for an enemy soldier and killed by his own allies. What is known is that his head was taken to Constantinople, where it was displayed on a stake, a grim irony for the man who had built his reputation on impalement. His body was said to be buried at the monastery of Snagov in Wallachia, though no conclusive remains have ever been found. Vlad the Impaler's legacy did not end with his death. If anything, it only grew. In the centuries that followed, he became a figure of legend across Eastern Europe. In Romania, he was remembered with a mix of pride and horror, a cruel tyrant, yes, but also a leader who brought order to a chaotic land and defended it against foreign domination. In the West, his image was shaped by sensationalist tales of bloodlust. German pamphlets and Russian chronicles portrayed him as a mad butcher, obsessed with cruelty. His reputation spread across Europe like wildfire. And then, centuries later, in the late 19th century, his name would inspire one of the most enduring characters in Gothic literature, Count Dracula. When Irish author Bram Stoker published Dracula in 1897, he drew upon fragments of Vlad's history, the name, the association with Transylvania, the aura of fear, and transformed him into the archetypal vampire. The historical prince became a supernatural monster. Fiction eclipsed fact. Yet behind the fangs and capes of popular culture lies the real man, Vlad III, son of the dragon, scourge of the Ottomans, terror of Wallachia. Vlad the Impaler's life lasted barely 45 years. His reigns, taken together, spanned less than a decade. And yet his legacy has endured for more than 5 centuries. He was a man of contradictions, a defender of his land, yet a destroyer of his people, a Christian prince, yet remembered for cruelty more than piety, a mortal ruler, yet immortalized as a vampire of legend. In the end, perhaps what makes Vlad so enduring is not whether he was a hero or a villain. It is that he embodied the rawest truths of power, that fear can rule where loyalty cannot, that terror can be more enduring than kindness, and that in the theater of history, cruelty often leaves the deepest mark. Vlad III, the Impaler. The man. The tyrant. The legend. The dragon's son who became Death's prince.